Our next speaker is John Soloninka. And John has been a great guide for me in the previous program that we had. In fact, we put together a special session on MedTech under his guidance. John is the president and CEO of HDX. He has over 24 years of experience in medical technology, consulting, company formulation, growth, and management. John was founder and senior executive leader in startup companies and in oncology.
You know what I'm going to do?
And
You know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to go over some of that.
Okay.
So let me.
Okay.
I don't mind if I say it, but when someone else says it, it gets embarrassing.
But but allow me to say, John, you did say that I have left the boring session to the last speaker. I want the tempo to go on, and I want the session to be closed on a high note.
No pressure. Yeah, no pressure. Well, listen, before I get started, I just have to make an observation. I read that book when I was, what, 4, 5, whatever, however old I was, All the Places You'll Go. I read it to my 2 kids when they were the same age. And, but there was something really startling about that video that that was completely new to me. And it's also something that I know I've been drawn to, but I just want to share it with you guys. And that's that you guys are living, although there's terrible stuff on the news and everything, but you guys are living in a very, very fortunate time. And I'm so glad that I live here at this time as well. When I grew up, in Toronto, by the way, white, conformity. There was one right way to do things. I'm telling you, if one of those people walked into my school, or that we saw Burning Man, walked into my school or said anything or did anything, they would have been ridiculed, they would have been practically carried out. And I must say, when I watched that, have you ever seen a more attractive, interesting, seemingly capable, aware, innovative, unusual group of people in your whole life? I know I haven't, and it practically brought me to tears just to watch those people do that. And then when I look around this room, remember, when I grew up, every one of you, maybe 1 or 2 would be black or Indian. When I grew up, now you look around the room, and there's a tremendous entrepreneurial spirit. I'm a charter member of TIE, and at last year's TIE presentation, we had Chuk, what's his name, that spoke and talked about the incredible capability of the diaspora and about the rest of the world. When you look around this room, diverse people, diverse religions, diverse thinking, diverse cultures. I worked at IBM for 5 years. We had every culture on the planet in the company, and we celebrated that. And so all I'm saying, and it's just a bizarre off-the-cuff kind of comment, but I'm just saying, you guys, and since I'm still living now, me too, we're so fortunate to have this diversity because it creates a tremendous amount leads to a tremendous amount of creativity and lack of stultification that you can sometimes get. So it was just a very moving thing that I noticed. So now, as I watch these 3 wonderful presentations, I really enjoyed them. I sort of was saying to myself, what the hell am I doing here? And what the hell is this presentation about? Actually, I was asked to speak to do a little bit of an introduction into the lean startup methodology and something called, related to that, the business model canvas. Well, as you heard these talks, they were all about sort of a generalization of characteristics of people, of what it's like, and so on. And mine is very much more on a set of tools. But I realized the intersection, these people and the lessons learned from the edge. Well, there are, and lifelong learning. These cannot be emphasized enough. And what I'm going to talk to you about is another way of doing a little bit more technical lessons, but how you can learn from some of the greatest people like Steve Blank and others in this world, how you can use these, use tools that have been created. Someone was saying, well, how do I do this in my own business? Do I have to know everything? Do I have to get an MBA? No, you don't. There are lots of tools that you can apply, but you can't apply them slavishly. So I want to talk a bit about some of those tools. And you'll see that business plans are obsolete. Startups shouldn't build businesses. Those are blasphemy, aren't they? I mean, how many people have gone through an MBA and said, business plan is everything for creating a business? And in fact, it is. But there are some fundamental flaws that people do, lessons from the edge. There are fundamental flaws that people do in business plans that you'll see in a minute. And startups shouldn't build businesses. This is one of the #1 failures, reasons that companies fail. And so, as I just made a note to myself, Ty will present many tools over the next 30 sessions, but they won't guarantee success. They will help, however, as Bart Simpson would say, they will help you suck less. So I want to talk about a couple of these things. And most of this stuff is in the Creative Commons area, so I've borrowed very heavily, as you should. But Steve Blank and Alexander Osterwalder are the creators of most of the stuff here, and go to businessmodelgeneration.com to look at some great videos and some great tools associated with the stuff I'm going to talk to you about. So a bit about me. This is, Lalit was going to go into this, but I wanted to cut him off at the knees there so that I could not have this being reproduced. So my background, unlike what was said before, I have more of the formal background. I was trained as an engineer. I was a professional engineer for a while. I went to do an MBA, and I had, my father was an entrepreneur, and I had every desire to become an entrepreneur. And I went out and did, in the 80s, I did aerodynamics engineering, my MBA, and then I worked in consulting in healthcare, in medtech, pharma, and other things. And after working in an incredible firm and developing expert knowledge in these areas, myself and several partners, we knew the world. We knew what we were going to do. And we went out and started a company in oncology and clinical trials, and then did another one in radiology integration, another one in a small one in proteomics, which we didn't carry forward, and then a third one in electronic medical records and clinical trials. Then I ran the life sciences business for IBM for 5 years, and all along I was working on creating this medtech early stage investment company, which I eventually became CEO of in 2010. So I've got the professional background, the big multinational background, as well as entrepreneurial background. So just a little bit about me. So, so what do I mean about these blasphemous terms? So you'll recognize this, which is actually from Sequoia Capital. It's a very nice, sort of very standard, but really effective presentation of a business plan. Okay, it's got all the elements. I'm not going to go through any of them. It's got all the elements. And when people think of, oh, I got to write the business plan, this is what they think about writing. And what's interesting is, I say over there, the business plan is the most important document you'll ever write, and get it wrong. And that's not failure, but you'll get it wrong. Okay. And the business model, notice that the business model is over there. It's one piece out of what, 8 or 10 pieces? What's really interesting about startup businesses is that most people get the business model wrong. But because they put this whole business plan together and it's based on all these assumptions, and that's the thing that you sell to your investors and you sell to everyone, then you can't be wrong because you've just taken their money to build that, right? But this is where #1 of the failures occurs. And what happens is, if you look at a typical business, that starts out with the initial idea generation, you're prototyping things, or you're developing the business, whatever. You get down to the point where you start making revenue, and then of course you grow operations. It's what you expect of the life cycle. The problem is, if you write a business plan and you get funded, then there's a tremendous amount of expectations to make exactly what you got funded work. Okay, but the reality is life doesn't work that way. And so, further to lessons learned. These are lessons from Steve Blank, actually. No business plan survives the first customer contact. It's the business model, stupid. In other words, it's really the core element is getting the business model right. All those other elements are, okay, if I've got the right business model, which says I identified a good gap, I've got a good solution, I've got competitive advantage, here's my business model, here's going to create value, all the rest of the stuff, financials, and all the rest of that stuff is just derived from, or an extension of, the business model. So take time to think through alternative possibilities. Your business model idea is just a set of hypotheses, and I'll explain that. And don't build your company until you've verified your business model. Now, one of the other things about this, and there's some great little videos of this on the web showing examples. But what typically happens is you write the business plan, you get a bunch of money, you go out and you build this thing, and you get to here, and you're talking to your real customers, and you say, look, this is what I built, you're going to buy it. And he says, that's not what I want. And what's that anecdote that says, I haven't got time to build it right, but I've got time to build it twice. Right? And actually, sometimes you don't have time and you don't have money to build it twice. But let's take a look at some of these other things. So the other theme of this talk is number one, it's about the business model. And you've got to validate the business model. The other is the difference between building the business versus searching and validating what the business is supposed to do before you actually build the business. Now you might think, well, that's stupid. I mean, you figure out the business, you figure out what you want to do, and then you go do it. Well, it's not as easy as that. And in fact, the most important thing that startups are not created, they are not created to build a company to go global. Startups are created to figure out what the hell the solution is and to validate what that solution is. And I'll show you one of my own companies where it didn't quite work that way. But we successfully got the company out of it. But how that can fail. So there's an element of search, which is figuring out what kind of customers, business model, and other things there. You go out and you create hypotheses of what good customers might be. You then, and business models, you then go out and do customer validation. So it's like an experiment. You create a hypothesis and then you do an experiment and then you determine whether you were right. And if you're wrong, then you go back and pivot and recreate a new alternative and keep doing this as to what are you doing for those customers or enabling them to do and how you interact with them. You have a way of distributing your product to them, whether it's an electronic product or a distribution product or whatever it happens to be. And that cycle creates revenue, different revenue streams through various channels. And on the back end, you've got to have certain key activities, resources, and partners that allow you to create that value proposition. And the way you built the business gives you a cost structure, and obviously that leads to the overall profitability of the business. Now, that's sort of a very, very high level, 50,000-foot description of a business. So what Steve Blank and Alexander, that's actually Alexander Osterwalder, what they did is said, okay, well, let's try and help this process, streamline this process of trying to figure out what businesses work and what businesses don't, okay? So let's create a method of just quickly sketching that. And that's what this is. So as you saw, this is analogous to that previous diagram, customer segments on the left, value propositions to those customers, and you can read the rest of the stuff here. And this can be used very effectively to map out your business in a way that can be tested with customers to see whether you've got the right idea. And in fact, I went out and bought Osterlander's iPad application. I've got it on my iPad if you want to see it afterwards. And then I took one of my businesses and I just took 20 minutes, I'm telling you, I took 20 minutes, no more, to put that business on, the original concept of our business on that piece of paper. There it is. So what do? This was an expert system for medical oncology to help, rather than patients having to come from far away to go to the big teaching hospitals, you want to have patients treated by general practitioners in their region so they don't have to travel, they get world-class care wherever they happen to be. And so the kinds of things that are up here, we've got academic, I'm not going to go all through this whole thing, but just to give you an idea. Academic oncologists, cancer carve-out networks, community oncologists, clinical trial groups as the customer segments. Our value proposition, the main one, is increased revenue, reduced costs, and making them the highest quality provider. And then a bunch of other things and channels and taking shares of revenue, installation service revenue, outcomes, and so on. And then who our key partnerships are. Like the world's best oncologists are one of our key partnerships and so on. So we thought, because we were healthcare IT and healthcare services and experts from Price Waterhouse, we thought we knew this thing, and we thought we knew how to redesign the industry and so on, how we could design the perfect delivery system. And in fact we did. We designed the perfect theoretical delivery system. So the reality was that, oh, and I'm sorry, one other thing I wanted to say. We had the great fortune of doing work for a client that caused us to survey 750 of the world's best oncologists across North America. And we got detailed information back from them, and we thought we had died and gone to heaven because this basically laid out exactly what we were going to do. Okay? In reality, all of those things I put up there on that business model, which was our very first business model, are guesses. We think that our customer is going to be this. We think that. We think this. We even asked people like those 750 oncologists, is that what it's going to be? But we didn't go out and actually validate it at the level that Steve Blank or other people are saying that you need to validate. And so all of these are guesses. And if you get any of them wrong, you're screwed. So the thing you need to do, as I mentioned earlier, the thing you need to do is say, each one of those guesses, you want to create what amounts to a little experiment where you identify someone who can validate that, and you go and talk to them. Or you do the research necessary. Or you get some other a professional advisor or so on that can really validate what's talking about. And then be honest with yourself about whether it's real. Someone said that you have to learn lessons from reality. Well, one of my partners who I was working with thought that the customers that didn't agree with our model were wrong. Isn't that cool? So here, when you go back after 2 years in the field, look at the ones that have the X through them. That we were actually wrong. We were flat out wrong. We had the Memorial Sloan Kettering and the Mayo Clinic and one other as our big blue chip elite providers. That was going to be our ticket. We're going to ride their coattails. Problem is, yeah, they are great, but they're unique. No one else is like them. They have incredible resources that nobody else has. They don't have the business problem that we are trying to solve. They were the worst. I mean, they're wonderful places, but they were the worst for our business. Absolute worst. And yet we spent a ton of time trying to get them as our elite advisors. Isn't that weird? And then there are a bunch of other things, like things that we learned that the customers would never actually do. That that various consultants and other things that we thought were going to be our distribution networks, we didn't have the scale, we didn't have the size to be able to do that. For example, those 750 people that we canvassed, they were all from here. Okay? These guys worry about data, quality, healthcare, and so on. The big volume of the market that we were actually aiming at, we didn't know this, but they were actually aiming at, are these guys. The community oncologists, what they care about is getting a patient through quickly, earning money off the drugs and other things that they sell, and getting a progress note out, and they don't care about anything else. So we designed the product with the wrong group of people solving the wrong problem. And then there are other things that we learned about. For example, we built our own custom electronic medical record. Now, without going into detail, that's a very, very, very complex, expensive thing. It's $10 million to market. $10 million. We did not expect to spend $10 million building the platform on which we would actually build our product. But there wasn't anything else there to build. So today it would be a lot easier than it was then. But I don't want to go into this in any more detail. I just want to say that this is real world stuff. This is real world stuff where we raised a ton of money. And it's a little different in, you have to understand, it's different if you're developing a web app, if you're developing a service business, or if you're developing things that can be done quite quickly, where you can do things quite quickly, or you can just describe them in words. In our case, or in biotech, or in pharma, stuff like that, where there's a tremendous amount of risk associated with developing the product, and in our case, you had to build a prototype to put it in front of an oncologist to say, is that what you want to do? You can't do it by smoke and mirrors. You got to actually show the person how it's done. So it's a little bit different than some of the businesses you'll be looking at. But this is real world stuff. If we had had this kind of, if I knew then what I know now, we would have been able to figure this out in about 3 months, not 2 years, and not millions of dollars after the fact. So I want to encourage you, there's going to be a course coming up, a couple of courses actually, on lean. Oh, why do we call it lean? Well, one of the reasons we call it lean is that if you get your business plan funded and then you go and you build your product for 2 years and then you take your product to market, you've spent 5, 8, 10 million bucks, and you're wrong. Lean says, Don't do that. Don't hire anyone. Don't build your business yet. Spend very little money figuring out what business you're in and what you're trying to build. Then you build exactly and the minimum amount of product that you need to solve the customer's business problem. We built everything. We built the most beautiful thing you'd ever want to see, and people said, I don't need 3/4 of those features, because we were talking to the wrong people. So, if you imagine that with that little tool, that little business planning tool, you can create lots of alternatives. And you can go out to your informants, and they can say, you know what, half of this stuff is garbage. It's that one over there that we perceive as the real value. Now, and so I can tell you that come to that lecture, bring your business model, get that iPad app. You could throw, or you don't even need it. You can just write out. You can read the stuff. Bring your business model to that next course. I can't remember what the date is, but whatever the date is, October 14th or something. And I think you'll find it very illuminating, because it'll cause you you'll have these pet desires of what you want your company to do, and when you really write it down, you'll find that's not what you're supposed to be doing, and it'll be very helpful. But no tools are silver bullets. No tools are panaceas. So you'll find, and I'll show you an example of someone who says, you know what, that business model canvas, it's sort of good, but not quite, because it doesn't capture a whole bunch of things you need, especially if you're in big business. But just for a moment, this idea of pivoting, I love it when Steve Blank says, when you make a mistake, just pivot. Just pivot. Well, you know, Steve, after having made billions of dollars, can go to an investor and say, I was wrong. I'm going to go this way. But if this is your first business, and you sweated blood to get $500,000 from angels or something like that, because you convinced them that you knew that that was the way to go, and you get there and it's 1 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and you're sitting there saying, oh my God, it's wrong. Those assumptions are wrong. It doesn't work. To pivot, to go back to your investors and say, remember I told you we're going there? We're going there. Okay, it's not that easy. It just isn't that easy. So what do you do about that? One of the things you do is you try and build that into your financing presentation, where you say, our assumptions are built on this. Our key assumptions are that. We are going to do this confirmationary exercise. If we're wrong and it looks like this, these are the various options that we have. So I'm just trying to say, you've got to build into your expectation setting with your partners, with your launch customers, with your financiers, that you may be pivoting for very good reasons. Okay. Other things, this is another one. This business model is only a snapshot in time. If you look at some of the other references I'll tell you about, business has changed dramatically. First, they're doing customization as they're in early stages. Then they've got a product which has the minimum value set. Then they're not doing any customization whatsoever. They're just ramping volume. And then if they ramp volume for a whole time, then they stop ramping volume. They say, how do we fix the product now and do the next best thing when we're doing it? So this does, so it's a great start, but just don't think it's going to do everything for you. It doesn't address the core differentiation and competitive competencies. And I'll show you what another fellow has done about that. And again, for those of you who are involved in high-risk drugs, medical devices, or even IT or telecoms or stuff like that, you got to be careful of this methodology. But you know what? There's nothing really new under the sun. So here's a methodology from Harvard Business Review, 1997. This is what IBM used as its main innovation tool. Sort of how do you build the business plan like the canvas, but this is what IBM used. And what it really says is, what's the gap, right? What's the gap? Did you see the gap on the canvas? No, you don't. So what's the gap? Market insight, strategic intent, innovation process, and business design leads to a set of capability requirements, and then how do you execute tasks and so on. So another one which is very famous, and it's old, it's what, 2002 or something like this? I love this thing. I love this thing because what it does is it says, you know what? When you start your business, you're going to be emphasizing that. Shortly thereafter, you're going to be emphasizing that, and then shortly thereafter, you're going to be emphasizing that. That's 3 different kinds of business. different emphasis on people, different different emphasis on engineering versus on sales versus on versus on service. And I'm not going to go into the details, but the crossing the chasm analogy is a very good one. It's something that you really should read. It'll help you understand, what do I need to hire and do in my mostly technology-oriented business? What do I need to do at what stage of business? And why is it so perplexing that companies have to make these changes? So, just in summary, no business plan survives the first customer contact. I can guarantee that on every single business that I've done. And I have 26 businesses that I've invested in my current medtech investment company. And I can guarantee you, we're not born yesterday. We know that they're going to make pivots and changes and other things. And no, their business plans don't even survive meeting us. I just want to... it's the business model stupid. In other words, you've got to get, regardless of how good your technology is, if your technology doesn't have a good business model idea, then you are not going to be successful. And again, you've got to take time to do it right, not time to do it twice. Your business idea is just a set of hypotheses. You need to validate those. And don't build your company until you've verified your business model. Again, remember, in the very early stages, your #1 priority is to search and validate your business model, not to try and hire people and hire the marketing guys and hire the sales guys and everything. That's too early, and you're going to be burning cash when you haven't even verified that you've got the right business model. And I think that's about it. I think that's what I'll end on, and I encourage you to come to the other sessions. I see some familiar faces from last year, but I do encourage you to come to the other sessions. So the lead has done a wonderful job again this year in setting up the course, and I think it's a wonderful mix of book learning and real life lessons. So thank you.